To the left of the temple of the mistress is Mount Lycaon, which some Arcadians call Olympus, others the Holy Mount, and they say that Zeus was raised upon this mountain. Among the marvels that Mount Lycaon has to offer, the most wonderful is this: there is on the mountain a sacred precinct of Zeus Lycaeus, the entry to which is forbidden to humans. If anyone transgresses the law and enters, then he must live no longer than a year, and it is said that all things, beast and man alike, cast no shadows. On the utmost peak of the mountain is a mound of earth. This is the altar of Zeus Lycaeus. From there is a panorama of the whole of the Peloponnese. In front of the altar, to the east, stand 2 pillars. Upon them, back in the day, gilded eagles were affixed. And upon this altar they sacrificed to Zeus Lycaeus in a manner that must not be spoken of. I had no desire to pry into the details of that sacrifice. Let them be as they are, and as they were from the very beginning. Welcome to Ancient Classics. The passage with which we opened comes from Book VIII of Pausanias' description of Greece, written in the 2nd century AD. Pausanias is describing the sacred sites and rituals upon Mount Lycaon, Arcadia, a site not too distant from the famous mountainside temple at Versailles. Pausanias professes an inability or fear to describe the secret, the literally unspeakable ritual sacrifices that went on atop Mount Lycaon. Now, Pausanias is one of our main and most reliable sources for the landscape, sites, and rituals of ancient Greece. He is renowned and celebrated for his precision and detail. So what ritual could be so dread, so horrific, that even Pausanias dared not describe it? Well, Pausanias may have refused to speak of what went on atop Mount Lycaon, but rumours had been abounding for hundreds of years before his time. Our key sources for these rumours come from 4th century BCE Athens, from the works of, or attributed to, Plato. In Plato's Republic, Socrates is discussing how rulers too often descend into tyranny. Let's not get too distracted here by the meaning of the Greek word tyrant, that's beside the point. Socrates illustrates this process by reference to the cultic practices upon Mount Lycaon. What begins the change then from leader to tyrant? Or is it clear that it happens whenever the tyrant begins to behave like the man in the story which tells of the sanctuary of Zeus Lycaeus in Arcadia? That is how whoever tastes human entrails when a man has been cut up and his innards have been mixed with those of various other victims, how he would inevitably turn into a wolf. Or haven't you heard the story? And there's another passage in the Minos, a dialogue also attributed to Plato, though I think the prevailing view is that it wasn't actually written by Plato himself. In this passage, Socrates and his unnamed interlocutor are discussing how different jurisdictions and cultures have different laws and customs. Socrates asks the other guy, "Hey, let's see if we can now clarify whether we use the same laws or different ones at different times, and whether we all use the same laws or whether some of us use some and others others." Socrates' pal responds, "Why, that, Socrates, is easy to determine, that the same men do not always use the same laws, and also that different men use different ones. With us Athenians, for instance, human sacrifice is not legal, but it's unholy, whereas the Carthaginians perform it as a thing they account holy and legal, and that some of them even sacrifice their own sons to Kronos, as I dare say you have heard. And it's not only barbarians who use different laws from ours, but our neighbours round Mount Lycaon and the descendants of Athamas. Well, you know their sacrifices, even though they are Greeks." So, from the Platonic corpus to the Neoplatonists, the 3rd century AD Neoplatonist Porphyry wrote a tract on vegetarianism, Peri apoces emsucon, perhaps more commonly known by its Latin name, De Absentia Besu Animalium, or just de Absentia, about abstaining from eating animals. In this work, Porphyry writes about the related theme of sacrificing animals and other living creatures, quoting Theophrastus, I think the one from the 4th century. Porphyry describes how sacrificial practices evolved, going on to note that, hence, even to the present time, not only in Arcadia, in the Lycaon rites, and in Carthage, men are sacrificed in common to Kronos, but periodically also for the sake of remembering the legal institute, they sprinkle the altars of those of the same tribe with blood. Now, from the way the quotation works in Porphyry, when he's speaking about the present time, it's not entirely clear to me whether Porphyry is speaking about his present time or whether this is a quotation from Theophrastus, roughly contemporary-ish with Plato. The reference perhaps to sacrifices going on in Carthage suggests he's talking about the 4th century, but I don't know. Either way, looking across the sources, we can infer that there were stories, rumours that the rituals upon Mount Lycaon involved human sacrifice. Now, the ancient Greeks are not on the whole too renowned for human sacrifice, so it seems that when they go down that path, they go hard with the unholy triumvirate of human sacrifice, cannibalism, and werewolves. Indeed, the name of the mountain on or near which all this happened, Lycaon, seems to be cognate with the Greek for wolf, lukos. But to which god were such sacrifices made? Plato and Pausanias calls the deity Zeus Lycaeus. Porphyry and Pseudo-Plato alternatively seem to suggest that the god is Kronos, but whatever. So this deity, Zeus Lycaeus, seems to be a local cultic version of Zeus himself. And as with so many manifestations, local variants of the gods of the pantheon, we might speculate that there was perhaps a separate local god that subsequently became associated with Zeus. We can see traces of such a local god, perhaps in a mythological character, an ancient king of Arcadia called Lycaon. Various tales of Lycaon have come down to us from ancient times. Each version differs in its details, but all centre around the themes of murder, cannibalism, and lycanthropy. And I think all such versions distinguish Lycaon from Zeus. Indeed, the two figures of Lycaon and Zeus usually feature as separate characters in conflict or opposition to each other. Let's take Ovid's version from Book 1 of the Metamorphoses as a representative example. Story so far, Ovid has described the creation of the universe, the cosmogony, the golden age, and mankind's subsequent descent into evil ways. Jupiter summons the gods to a meeting to discuss what to do about our depraved human race, proposing that humanity needs to be destroyed. To help make his case, Jupiter recounts his encounter with Lycaon as an exemplar of human wickedness. I had traversed Mount Minala, bristling with the lairs of beasts, Kyllene, and the pine forests of chill Mount Lycaon. From there, I entered the Arcadian abode, the inhospitable home of the tyrant, just as the evening shadows ushered in the night. I let it be known that I, a god, had arrived, and the common folk began to pray, but Lycaon mocked their pious prayers, and presently he said, I'll check whether he's a god or mortal by a patent test. Then there'll be absolutely no doubt. So he plotted to assassinate me in my sleep. Now, that way of testing the truth seemed like a good idea to him, but he wasn't happy with that alone. So he cut with a blade the throat of a Molossian hostage and broiled part of his half-dead body and roasted the rest. But as soon as he'd laid these down at the table before me, I brought a avenging flame upon his palace and the household gods, who were as bad as their master. Lycaon fled, terrified, and when he reached the silent countryside, trying in vain to talk, he howled. He started rabidly frothing at the mouth, and his customary desire for slaughter turned to cattle. And even now he rejoices in blood. His clothes turn to furs, his arms to forelegs. He's become a wolf, but he retains the traces of his former self. His grizzled hair and his brutal countenance are the same, his eyes glow the same, and still he is the very embodiment of savagery. So we have the two, or shall we say, three characters, a trinity. Zeus, the boss god, Lycaon, the ancient Arcadian king, and the wolf. And each is in some respects differentiated from one another, but in other respects conflated. Thus, Lycaon transforms into the wolf, and Zeus and Lycaon, whilst separate in the mythology, are combined into the single cultic figure of Zeus Lycaeus, to whom a precinct upon Mount Lycaon is dedicated, and to whom human sacrifices are offered. We can only speculate how the role that each part of the Trinity fused together in the evolution of the rituals upon Lycaon that Pausanias and the like refer to. Perhaps there was once a primeval wolf worship cult. Seems not too far-fetched to think the locals near the mountain might have made apotropaic sacrifices to placate and ward off the wolves of the mountain from their flocks. The cultic fascination with wolves might, for example, explain the existence of so many other werewolf-related tales from the region. The figure, therefore, of a wolf deity may have become fused with some local king, perhaps then eventually identified or conflated with Zeus himself. Who knows? It's possible. Although conversely, in the 19th century, Berard saw the rituals of Zeus Lycaeus as a Eastern, probably a Phoenician import. And remember how earlier we saw that both Pseudo-Plato and Porphyry mentioned the sacrifices at Lycaon and at Carthage in the same breath. Carthage, of course, was settled by Phoenicians. But Pausanias had his own theories about how the rituals at Mount Lycaon evolved. My view is that Lycaon was contemporary with Cecrops, the king of Athens, but that they were not equally wise in matters of religion. For Cecrops was the first to name Zeus the supreme god and refused to sacrifice anything that had life in it, but burnt instead on the altar the national cakes which the Athenians still call pelanoi. But Lycaon brought a human baby to the altar of Zeus Lycaeus and sacrificed it, pouring out its blood upon the altar. And according to the legend, immediately after the sacrifice, he was changed from a man into a wolf. I, for my part, believe this story. It has been a legend among the Arcadians from way back in the day, and it has the additional merit of probability. Pausanias even mentions another thematically related rumour of contemporary Arcadian werewolves, one likewise associated with the sacrifices upon Lycaon. It is said, for instance, that ever since the time of Lycaon, a man has changed into a wolf at the sacrifice to Zeus Lycaeus, but the change is not permanent. If, when he is a wolf, he manages to abstain from human flesh, then after 9 years he becomes a man again. But if he tastes human flesh, he remains a beast forever. But I think all this leads to a problem with Pausanias' account of the sacrifices upon Lycaon, with which we started this video. Remember Pausanias' coyness, his refusal to talk of the unspeakable acts at Mount Lycaon. Well, when one takes into account the fact that he's already told just a few chapters earlier of the sacrifice come cannibalism come werewolfism of Lycaon, well, for him to subsequently play dumb or too afraid to speak or inquire, it just sounds forced to me. The accounts, the rumours of human sacrifice at Lycaon were no secret. It seems to me that Pausanias maybe even visited the shrine, hoping to find something salacious, shocking to write about, and I can imagine that maybe when he got there all he found was them sacrificing a chicken or something. And for the record, according to Walter Burkert, who covers these myths and rituals in his seminal book Homo Necans, no human remains have been found at or around the site of Zeus Lycaeus. So perhaps Pausanias knew full well that there were no human sacrifices there, perhaps even never were, which was a bit of a disappointment for him. but he couldn't bring himself to lie and claim otherwise, so he had to play all mysterious and cute. A bit like all those YouTube channels with their clickbaity titles that lead to nothing. Just a sacrificial chicken. So some things indeed do not change. Let it be as they have been since the very beginning, as Pausanias himself might say. Till next time, like and subscribe, and click on that notifications button, and we'll be back soon.